growing up neurodivergent in neurotypical societies where ableism is the norm, we come to focus on what's apparently wrong with us rather than what's strong with us. And this kind of deficit-oriented mentality keeps us trapped in this mental prison of believing we're inherently flawed or disabled. And granted, being neurodivergent comes with some challenges. Our neurotype often leads us to think, communicate, behave in ways that neurotypicals don't deem acceptable. We're often saddled with an array of co-occurring challenges: sensory differences, motor differences, social difficulties, co-occurring health conditions like hypermobility. And so, yes, there is some inherent challenge to being a neurodivergent, and I would not attempt to downplay that. But I think when we're already struggling with all of these challenges, the last thing we need to do is focus on what is apparently our array of problems, because you can't build from that. If all you are is a summation of your problems, then who are you really? Like, it's very confining to look at yourself in that way. And I know because of internalized ableism, a lot of us have a tendency to put ourselves in that box, to regard ourselves as being just a collection of problems or flaws. And I don't want to be kind of Pollyannish and say that they don't exist and that we should just ignore them and pretend that they're not there, because that's not a very reality-oriented approach, right? But I think the overt focus that we put on it is a result of internalized ableism. We learn that if we catch our flaws first before anyone else can, we can then, preempt them, avoid them, hide them, mask them, or find ways to compensate for them so that it doesn't become a glaring problem and affect our lives or affect our relationships. Now, that's being adaptive. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to be adaptive, but I think when it's driven by internalized ableism of feeling like you're inherently flawed and that you're not enough and that there's something wrong with you and that you have to always be fixed, that's problematic. And I believe, and I'm a really strong proponent of this, that we should look at what our inherent strengths are as well, and we should build on that. What am I inherently good at? So people who are neurodivergent might have strengths in areas that are unexpected because we have a spiky neurocognitive profile, meaning most people have an array of different skills and weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses, and it tends to have minimum variability. So you can imagine it as a waveform, a strength here, a weakness here. And we tend to have more extremes where it comes to this neurocognitive profile. It's a lot more spikier, more higher highs and lower lows. And because of that, it's easy to perceive our flaws, but also I think it should be easy to perceive our strengths. For example, some of us are highly empathic. I call it hyperempathy. We can infer other people's emotional states. We can respond strongly. We can attune ourselves to other people's needs. We might have more deliberative thinking, so we're a lot more slower and deliberate in our processing of things. We might be multi-passionate. We might have multiple interests that we like to spend our time investing in, and so we develop a breadth of skills and interests, and it makes us richer as a person. Those are just some examples of multiple strengths that manifest among neurodivergents. And then, there's variation in different strengths that everyone has as a human being, that I think those are things we can lean toward. But in the case of neurodivergence, let's just focus on the ones I mentioned. Hyperempathy. You could go into a caring profession role and lean into that hyper-empathic nature. As I did, I became a therapist. Or if you are more deliberative, you might want to do something that requires a lot more slower-paced processing, so writing books, which is something I love to do. I like to take my time and gather my thoughts. I'm not inherently a performer, and this kind of stuff doesn't come second nature to me, so I prefer that kind of thing. And then multi-passionate, well, I have multiple interests or multiple passions that I'm entertaining at any given time. I'm studying. I'm doing a PsyD program right now, for example. I work full-time as a therapist. I write books in my spare time. I lead social groups. All of these things I'm passionate about, and I have the energy and the zeal to pursue them as a neurodivergent that I might not have if I wasn't neurodivergent, if I was a neurotypical. So that's what I mean by finding what's strong and not what's wrong with somebody. Look at the things that you excel at, lean into them, celebrate them, and redirect your focus when you're being negativistic about yourself towards those and how you can shine in those avenues, rather than focusing on where your low is in this neurocognitive profile. That is how you can move forward with your life, not by fixating on what's not going to plan or what isn't as good or perfect or normal as you would like it to be, and instead focusing on where you shine. Have you noticed a tendency in yourself to focus on the negative? Have you been able to identify your strengths as a neurodivergent person? And have you been able to lean into them and redirect your focus when you've become fixated on, let's say, your failings or your deficits, or however you phrase it? I would love to hear from you.